Okay, today we're going to start Samach Vav Amud Aleph, and we're going to start about a little over halfway down the page. We're going to start with the word V'loi. We did the Mishnah, and at least in my Gemara it starts with the beginning of a line. It's V'loi. Okay, we thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day, and this class of our learning we should have the base of Mikdash immediately. Panacea. V'loi. Yeah. It doesn't. Let's take a look. What are we talking about over here? So it turns out that that a woman that's married to a Kayan gets to eat Truma. And if she is not allowed to be married to the Kayan, so she becomes a halala, and then she's not allowed to eat Truma. So we made a distinction now that this woman that's not allowed to eat Truma herself, but because she brought into the marriage slaves, so those slaves belong to the husband. So she herself becomes a halala. So if the slaves are hers, then the slaves can't eat Truma. Just like she can't eat Truma, the slaves can. But if the slaves belong to the husband, depending on how she brings it in, if it's called Nichse Malug, which we said Yusufrakt, then the slaves belong to her. But if it's Nichse Tzain Barzal, then the slaves belong to the husband and they can eat Truma. The husband is a regular Kayan. She has the problem because she was not allowed to. She's like a widow to the Kayan Gadol or a divorcee to the Kayan. That's how we explained it. So we said the rule that we just gave was Kol ha'oichel maichel. Anyone that is able to eat can also feed. That would mean that a wife that is eating Truma can feed her slaves Truma. But Kol she'ein oichel, if she can't eat, then her slaves can eat as well. It says V'loi. Is that how it works? She can't feed as well. Let's say there's a Kayan that's an Aral. The rule is that he is an Aral. He was never circumcised for whatever reason. Maybe it was hemophilia. Whatever the case is, he's not supposed to eat Truma. But he's still a Kayan, and the rest of his household is allowed to eat Truma. Let's say the Kayan is Tameh. He's not allowed to eat Truma. But the rest of his household is eating Truma. He's Michael. What are you telling me that Kol she'ina oichel ina Michael? She'ina oichel machilim? Okay. The Gemara answers Hasam pumayu koyev lo. Over there in those cases, the Arl and the Tmeim, it says his mouth is hurting him. He's not eating. It means that it's temporary. He's an Arl. He's tamei. Yeah, he has a pain in his mouth, so he's not eating. But it's fixable, right? This woman, it's not fixable. She becomes a halala. So therefore, she can't. 1 second. It's saying what's fixable. Very interesting case of it. How do you get a mamzer in here? Turns out that if there's a woman that's married to a Kayan, so she eats Truma, everything's fine. She has a daughter. The daughter marries a mamzer. Now the Kayan, the child is a mamzer. Of course, marries a mamzer. The child's a mamzer. Now no, he's not a Kayan because it's a daughter. If the daughter marries a, yeah. So what happens now? When the Kayan, who's the grandfather of the mamzer, passed away, so the wife will only eat Truma if there's a remaining child in the house. Turns out, who in this case is the remaining child is the mamzer. It's not a child. The daughter had a baby together with the mamzer, so it's a grandchild. So that grandchild, why doesn't the daughter herself? Why doesn't the daughter herself cause? I thought if there's a child, then the mother will continue to eat. Ah, because the daughter passed away. The daughter passed away. So we have left over here the wife and her father. There's 3 generations here. There's a woman married to a Kayan. They have a daughter. The daughter gets married, marries a mamzer. They have a child that's a mamzer. Okay, so now there's 2 deaths. The woman that's married to the mamzer and the Kayan. Now, the widow, the grandmother, wants to eat truma. She's able to because there's a mamzer down there. There's a grandson that's a descendant of this Kayan that's part of her family that allows her to eat truma. Now, the mamzer himself is not allowed to eat truma. Now, the truth is, we didn't have to go so far. We could have said, even if he's a Yisrael, he can't eat truma. It doesn't have to be a mamzer. Why did we pick this case? Because we have a Mishnah that says that case. It didn't mean okay. Whatever the case is, turns out that someone that cannot eat truma is Michael, and it's not fixable. So the Gemara says, Amar Avina, Kinyan Eichel Ka Amar. We're talking about someone that's acquired. We're not talking about someone that's part of the family that's going to cause to eat. Yeah, this is a good question, but that wasn't what we're referring to. Talking about if there's either slaves or a woman that gets married, that we're talking about that if she's Eichel Ka'amar, Kinyan Eichel Michael. If she is able to eat herself, then she can feed. She'ein Eichel Eina Michael. It was all in the category of a Kinyan, of an acquisition, as opposed to if it would be part of the family, which is that grandson that's a mamzer or even a Yisrael. Okay. Kinyan means acquisition. So we're talking about someone that's acquired, either a wife or a slave. Are they allowed to eat truma because they're acquired by a Kohen? So we call that the term Kinyan, acquired. Yeah, if they're fit to be married to the Kohen. Okay. In this instance, they're not fit because it was a prohibited marriage. And what was your other question? The mamzer is a child that's born from a union that was not allowed with the punishment of kares, like incest type of marriage, or adultery, a married woman. So the child that's born from that is called a mamzer. Now that mamzer has all his own halachas. It's complicated how we can get married and whatever. Is that relevant specifically for truma? No. Ask, is that relevant specific? Not necessarily. It has its own halachas. Is it possible for there to be a mamzer kain? No, it can't be a mamzer kain. It's impossible. If the child becomes a halal, a halal or whatever, it can never be. Okay.
Child of a Kohen can never become a Kohen can never have a mamzer.
Can never be. He can have a mamzer, but it would never. You can never have both names together. Kohen mamzer. It doesn't.
Not nice.
Not nice. It's a square circle.
The Kohen has a relationship with a married woman.
Yeah. So the child is going to be a mamzer, but it's not a Kohen.
But he could be a non-Kohen, an ex-Kohen.
Yeah. Okay, we're holding now by Rav Amar. Rav says, "Midiraisa mechalachli." We had a question over here. Shouldn't the slaves that are brought into the marriage by the woman, prohibited marriage, but shouldn't the slaves be allowed to eat truma, even though the wife can't eat truma, but that's her own problem because this is a forbidden marriage, but the slaves should be allowed to. Rava says, yes, it's true. They actually do eat. So what's the issue? The issue is for Rabbanan the Gasibu. It's only a rabbinic decree. Why? Kadesh Taimar Ani Eni Eichelas Avoda Eni Eichlin Zaini Etzlei Hilka Chasi Lafuka. Want it to be very obvious that this is not a correct marriage. So if the slaves would be eating, they'd say, well, nishkeferlach. So we want to say that no one over here is allowed to be eating truma, and therefore he'll divorce her, which is what the anticipated outcome.
That's the question. I'm still thinking.
Yeah.
That's the question. So this happens sometimes in our day. Kohen marries divorcee.
Right.
Boy is just not a Kohen.
Right.
Not a mom.
Officially, it's called the halal.
The
Yeah.
girl is a kalala.
The girl is a halala, yeah.
There's no real lifetime impact on the boy.
Right.
He's just not a Kohen.
Right.
But the girl, there.
Yeah.
The issues.
The girl can't marry a Kohen.
And the
In
boy,
last week's parsha, Isha Zaina v'Chalala is referring to that girl. The boy is allowed to marry any Jewish girl and the daughter of a Kohen. Right? There's no.
he's just not a Kohen.
He's just not a Kohen.
So who would
He could
marry
go to
him?
the cemetery. Okay. Ravashi says, Gzeir shematacha lachar misa. There's a gzeira. This is going to create problems for us because why us specifically in this case? Ravashi says that if the slaves would be eating truma during the period of this marriage, then what's going to happen is after the Kohen husband passes away, who do the slaves belong to? They're going to go to the wife because she brought them in. She's not allowed to eat truma. The slaves are going to continue eating truma, thinking that, well, we ate while he was alive, we'll continue to eat. Gemara says, if that's what you're worried about, Elamayata, Bas Yisrael Shenisas Lekayin, Lei Taichel, Gzeir Shematach Alachem Misa. Then every Jewish girl that marries a Kayan, after the marriage ends, either because of a divorce or a death, no, not because of a divorce, because of a death, if the marriage ends because of a death, then we should not allow we're asking for her or the slaves? What are we talking about? Yeah, the slaves. The slaves that she had, which are going to go back to her, and where they're going to end up. She's going to go back to her father's house, which was Yisraelim, that don't eat truma, unless it was a child. But if there's no child, she returns to her father's house. We should make a decree. Maybe the slaves are going to continue to eat truma. They shouldn't be allowed to eat the whole marriage. If that's what you're worried about in this case, when it was a prohibited marriage, it's the same halacha after the death of the Kohen in any marriage. Ravashi Balmanake Anastasia Lairuye Mikarach Libachuma de Benasha Intabe Le Lahai Achli Bachuma de Gavroi Bashta Hadrila Milsa Kamaisa Layada de Mikar Le Shavisi Nafshi Halala Hashtavis Nafshi Halala. Okay. Here, what are we dealing with? We've pushed the case into it's all one very narrow case. Talking about Almana Kehenes. She's a widow, but she also came from a household of Kayanim. So she's married to a Kayan and her father's a Kayan. Well, she's going to be Meire Heter the following. She says, by the way, she's a widow.
Her
Her husband died, or she's a divorcee and now she's married to a Kohen. So it's her second marriage. Either way, it's her second marriage. So she says like this, well, you know what? I was married once before. What happened last time? After the divorce of his first husband, she went back to her father's house and she ate shumah. Well, now she gets married to a Kohen a second time. I don't know what the first marriage was, a Kohen or not, it doesn't matter, right? But whatever the case is, after the marriage ended, she went back to her father's house. Well, now the marriage ended again. She goes back to her father's house. She wants to eat shumah. Now, Originally, she ate truma from her father's house. She marries this person. So she eats truma by her husband. Now she wants to go back to her father's house and eat truma. Says but she doesn't know the first, at the end of the first marriage, she wasn't a halala. But hashta shavisal nafshi halal. Now she's a halala. She can't eat truma. That's the problem. So what is our whole issue over here? Why is the avdei malug not allowed to eat truma? Because this is a case of a widow that her father was a kain, and she's actually gonna really have a heter, like not correctly, but she's gonna really think that she's allowed to serve the avadim truma back in her father's house. Turns out that we've just limited the case to only when she's coming from a household of kayanim. Why did we have to do that? Because otherwise we're going to say that every marriage, that's the slave should not be allowed to eat truma, because after the death of the kohen, they're going to think they can continue. The Gemara says, "Teinach almana kaihenes." You've resolved the Mishnah, but only in one case. If it's almana kaihenes, now we understand that there's a difference. Avdi malug should not be allowed to eat truma, but almana bas Yisrael ma'ikal meimar. What about every other case? The Mishnah didn't say that it's only a case of an almana that comes from a household of a kayin. It says, when it comes to widows, they didn't make a distinction, because in the case of an almana kaihenes, a widow from a household of kayanim, she's going to think that the slaves can eat truma afterwards. This is all Rav Ashi's gezerah. So we say the same thing applies to every almana. All right. Sounds like a stretch, but Itmar. New case, new story. Same topic, but it's a new scenario. Hamachneses shum labayla. Very interesting. A person has some sort of property. A woman is getting married. She brings into the marriage a very special piece of special item. I don't know, shum means it's evaluated. No, not garlic. It's something that's evaluated. Something that has
guaranteed property.
Yeah, so she brings it into the marriage, an appraised property. What its value is, she brings it into the marriage. Well, the rule is that the husband, when they get divorced, the husband has to give back the exact value of that. This is called nichsei tzain barzel.
The sheep, the iron sheep.
Iron sheep. The husband decides he wants to keep it.
Ooh.
And give her the value. And she says, no, I want the item. It was in my family. It's a
heirloom.
It's the tefillin from this great tzaddik. And the husband, I'm keeping this. And she says, no, I need it back. This is a classic case. And it's got to be every story has something like this. So, here Meres Keliani, they tell us. She says, I want the item. Sentimental. It's my family's heirloom. He says, what are you talking about? I took responsibility. I'm going to give you the value. Hadinim me. Who wins? Rav Yehuda Amar, Rav Yehuda says, Hadini ma. She wins. Rabbi Amar Hadini mai. Rami says he wins. Okay, back to the same machlekes. It's a difference. Machlekes husband and wife, and machlekes and din. That's a different sort of machlekes. Yeah, this one doesn't have the hard feelings. Rav Yehuda Amar Hadini ma mishum shvach beisavia. Didei havi. Shvach beisavia sounds like it's prestige. That could be. Yeah, but I don't, not necessarily has it increased. What it means is that it brings prestige to her family, and it's part of her family's possessions. Rabami Amardini Mike, even the Marmar, in Mesu, Mesu Live, in Mesiri, Mesiri Lai, Hail Vachai Bachriusan, Yaichlo. What did the Mishnah say? She brings in slaves, okay, to the marriage. The Mishnah was talking about slaves. The slaves were Tzayin Barzel. They were written in the Ksuba that the husband has to pay for them no matter what, at their value. If there's an increase of value, it belongs to the husband. If they die, he still has to pay it back. And therefore, those slaves are allowed to eat Shuma, even if the marriage was a forbidden marriage and she's a halala and she herself can't eat Shuma. Why? Because those slaves belong to the husband. Clearly, something that's appraised, which is like these slaves were appraised, belongs to the husband. Rabami has a real proof from the Mishnah. Even though it's not it doesn't have to be a kli. It's anything that was appraised. We're talking about tzayin barzel, those iron sheep. It doesn't change its price, and it's the husband has to pay her its original value, and therefore they can eat shuma. That's a proof that everything belongs to the husband.
Even if they increase, even if the sheep become more valuable, time doesn't
If
matter.
the sheep become more valuable,
He takes the
gain.
and
And
she paid the original
the original right.
Wow.
Amar Rav Safra. Rav Safra says, "Mikatani v'hein shalai." Doesn't say that it's his. It says Hayil v'chai b'achriyusin ktani. It just says he's responsible.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's his. Being responsible doesn't mean that it's his. Sigmar says, 1 second. It has to be his. If it's not his, then there's a problem. What are you going to tell me, that just because of a responsibility they're allowed to eat shuma? Take a look at the following case. Vatanan, we have a Mishnah. This is clearly coming up in your mind. Yisrael shesachar para mikayan. What happens in a rental? There's a responsibility. Not in a house, but I'm saying if so, those days you would rent other things. You would rent a cow. You would rent, right? You could rent a slave. Someone that rented a cow from a kohen. Now the renter is the Yisrael. He has to feed the animal. He happens to have truma in his house. Why does he have truma? Maybe he didn't give it yet. I don't know. He has truma, or he can go buy truma. How do you buy truma? Well, there's a market for truma. It's just a little cheaper because you don't have the same clientele. So, Harizi Yachelena Kashini Truma can feed it. Kashine is vetch, is these little beans. Can feed it truma beans. Kayin Shesacha Param Yisrael. Let's say the opposite. Let's say there's a Yisrael that owns the cow, and a kohen rents it. He rents a cow. Even though he has to feed it, the renter has to feed it. He can't feed it kashini truma. Can't feed it the truma, even though he's responsible. So here we're seeing that it's only the actual owner. So obviously, who was allowed to feed the slaves? It must be that it was owned by the kohen. That's why there's allowed to feed him. Umar says, "V'tizra, do you really think so? That's how it works? That responsibility works just like there's a certain type of responsibility, and being responsible doesn't allow the person to eat truma. There's different types of responsibility. Over there, the renter is only responsible if it gets stolen or lost. But in seha, if an absolute accident happened, or if it gets weaker, or it gets weaker, or it gets worth less, does he have to pay for that difference? He's a renter. You see, there's different types of responsibility. If there's a change in price from when he rents it to when he returns it, I don't know, the market changes. if there's a change in price, in the market price of cows, so when he gives it back, he's giving back less than the value of when he actually took it out, when he rented it. He doesn't have to pay that difference. He doesn't have full responsibility the way the husband has responsibility for these items. So over there, when he's renting it, he cannot eat truma. He cannot feed it truma because he doesn't have a real responsibility. By us, he has a real responsibility. Okay. Olay damya el seifa. Yisrael shesam paramikayan. This is a strange renter. He rents it with an evaluation of the cow. I don't know why he would do this, but let's say the guy says, I'm not renting it. So he says, well, let's do it like this. What's its value? It says 100 zuz. So he says, okay, I'm going to give you back 100 zuz. I know its value, whatever the case is. Somehow he has to make a security to the owner. It probably has to convince him to rent it. So he's telling him, I'm going to give you back the value no matter what. So even if there's a change in market. So here, this is a different story. Over here, Yisrael shesam paramikayan layachilena kashini truma. Over there, he can't feed it truma. Who owns it? The kayan. But because he took on that responsibility of the full value, aval kayan shesam param Yisrael, the opposite. If a kayan has that same sort of rental from a Yisrael, yachilena kashini truma, then he can actually feed him truma. Why? Because when you accept that type of value, that's almost like the ownership itself. Yeah. So an evaluation, an appraisal makes it like that person's. Seems to be a nice support for Abami. Yeah. Yosef Rabba v'Rav Yosef b'Shili Pirkei de Rav Nachman v'Yasvi v'Kamri. Rabba and Rav Yosef b'Shilhi over here does not mean in the back. B'Shili means after. Yeah. Otherwise, I was a little surprised that Rabba and Rav Yosef should be sitting in the shir of Rav Nachman and they're talking in the back. No, it doesn't mean they're talking in the back. It means after the shir they're discussing. I think Rashi actually spells that out. B'Shili Pirkei. Kishasiyah madrasha. Yeah, Rashi spells that out. You make sure that no one thinks that they're talking in class. What are they saying? Tani kavasei de Rav Yehuda, v'tani kavasei de Rav Ami. They say we have brises that support both of these. Tani kavasei de Rav Ami. The brisa that supports Rav Ami. Avdi tzayin barzel yotzim b'shein va'ayin leisha v'lei leisha. Very interesting how the Gemara goes through trying to support each side. So what happens if there's a slave that the woman brought into the marriage and it's called tzayin barzel. Tzayin barzel means that the owner, the husband takes full responsibility for this. And if there's a divorce, he has to pay her the original price of the slaves that she brought in. Now we have a rule that if a master knocks out a tooth or an eye of the slave goes free. Who's the master here? The husband or the wife? It was her family's from beforehand, but they brought it in, and now the husband has full responsibility. So is the husband the master or is she the master? This is going to make a difference if the slave goes free, if they get hit by the wife from the husband. So the rule, the Brisa says, the husband is the owner, not the wife. So Raya to Rabami, that if she wants to take her items back, that she only gets the value, not the original item. Tani Kavasei Rav Yehuda. However, there's a Brisa the opposite. Hamachneses shum lebaila, someone that brings in an appraised item into the marriage, imratza bal limkar. If the husband wants to sell, la yimkar, he can't sell it. Then not only that, if he wants to add something into the ksuba, so he appraises an item and puts it in the ksuba, she's going to get this value. Imratza bal limkar, la yimkar. the item. He can't sell it either. Machru shneim leparnasa. Parnasa is just a scenario. If either of them sell it, shneim actually means either. If they happen to make the sale, why would they sell any item? They needed it for food. They needed sustenance. Rashi says, someone said, Parnasa, yeah, it's only orcha de milsa. Just people don't sell things unless they actually need food. They keep their items. That's because they made them themselves. It's not because if they were imported from China, they would sell them anyway. It's a different world. So, this was a story that came in front of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Says that the husband can go to the buyer and say that wholesale is a mistake. The wife wasn't allowed to sell it. She sold it and it was really mine. It wasn't really his, but it's enough that it's his. So how does this approve to Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda says that she gets the item because
But if she gets the item, why can't she sell it?
the reason is because while she's around, he has no rights to sell.
That would be approved to her.
No, the fact that she exists so one second. One second. I think he's taking it out after the death. Or now it's either one can take it back. The wife can go and say, my husband sold it. And the husband can say, the wife can go and say, my husband sold it without my permission. And the husband can also say that my wife sold it without my permission. So which means that she has ownership here. Rabbi Yehuda says that the item still belongs to her. And when she asks for the item back at the end of the marriage, she gets the item. Now, how does the husband claim that the sale was no good? No, but it could be that the husband sold it and he still says that the sale is no good because I wasn't allowed to sell it because my wife was around.
So he's going back on himself, not
Or-
her.
Either on himself, well, I don't know if he can go back on himself, but if the husband sold it, she can take it out. That would be the proof. That would be a good proof. She can take it out if the husband sold it, saying that he wasn't allowed to sell it. I was around. Okay.
She sell what's hers. Meaning, sell it to somebody subject to the rights of the husband.
Oh, yeah, that's what's happening here. She's selling it.
She's selling the cow to somebody, but the husband still has the right to help it, use it like he did.
Yeah, that probably has to do with the machlaikas of kinyan peres ke kinyan aguf. If the husband has more rights than just the use. I think we had before Shnei Meni Mechelim Libka or something. Zelafi Shena Shaloi, Zelafi Shena B'Shusa. We had something. Okay, so we have a support that she has some rights to this. That's a support to Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rav Nachman Alach Rabbi Yehuda. Rava says in the name of Rav Nachman Alach Rabbi Yehuda that she gets the item back. Amali Rava Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, "Vatani Kavasei Rav Ami." But what about the brisa? Says Afagav the Tani Kavasei Rav Ami Mistaber time of the Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Shrach B'Savir. I know there's a brisa, but nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda's argument is logical. How does that work? It's interesting that the logic is going to overrule maybe because he has two brises.
first. That's the shvach, basically, she's, in other words.
Uh-huh. You want to say that there's a chazaka? Uh-huh. I'm not sure. Okay. Hahi itza daile legavre itztila demilsa. A nice complicated case. You have a woman, she gets married. She brings into the marriage a robe of milas, of wool, fine wool. Iksubasa. Okay.
Interesting, nice, complicated case.
What's the in the ksuba? That means that it was written there. It's nechse tzain barzel. She's supposed to get it back. Now we just said the halach's like Rabbi Yehuda. She actually gets the item back. So shachiv, the husband passed away. Well, she wants it back. Shaklu yasme. Before she gets a chance to go into the closet and take it, the children, the orphans, they take it, upersua misna, and they spread it over the corpse of the Amarava. Rava says, Kanya misna. The corpse acquired the mink coat.
Wasn't it just the Rambam? We just never learned about not to do that.
The corpse?
Yeah.
I don't know. Can't take it off. The problem is that anything that's used by a corpse becomes forbidden to have benefit from. The corpse acquires, it becomes like asr bana, it becomes like chametz, it becomes like all everything that's forbidden to use. So now she wants to take it. It's mine. The Rava says, too late. It's already been used by the corpse. Yeah, it would have to get buried with the corpse.
He's gonna get buried with his Rolls Royce.
That's right. So Amarle Nanai Breder of Yosef, Breder Ravel or Rav Kana. It's a new name for me. Nanai, the son of Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rava, says to Rav Kana, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, Lach Rabbi Yehuda. 1 second. It's not theirs. She gets the item back. We said the halach like Rabbi Yehuda. She wants the original item, not the value. Amalei milei meid Rabbi Yehuda the mechusa gavaina, given the mechusa gavaina b'shusekai. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that she never got it. She does deserve it, but until she gets it, it's still theirs. It's still in the estate. So yes, she can demand it, but now it's too late. She's demanding something that's already forbidden. She can't take it because the corpse has it.
She getting money for it?
Will she get money for it? Yeah, she's supposed to get money. Yeah, they have to give money. Okay, Rava follows this logic that he says the Rava hektish chametz v'shichrer mafkim midei shibud. There is a possibility that if someone designates certain items to be collected, he tells the person that he owes the money to that you'll collect from these items. But then he goes ahead and he's makdash it. He consecrates that item. So he's able to like rip it out from under the lien. He put a lien on it. He's able to take it out from under the lien and make it hektish, and the lien just disappears. Same thing would happen if it was before Pesach, and even if he borrowed money from a non-Jew, and he says you'll take it from all the pasta, so then becomes Pesach, becomes asr bana. He can't use that pasta to pay. It like takes the lien off it. Well, now it's to his detriment. Then also, if he designates a slave, there's a lien on the slave. If I don't pay you back, you take the slave. Then he goes and he frees the slave.
Ooh.
So he took the lien off it. So mafkim midei shibud. So what are we saying over here as well? That the placement of the cloak, of this robe on the corpse takes the lien off it, and it ends up that she can't get it. because it becomes Asr Ba'ana, belongs to the corpse. Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda says, let's say she brings in 2 items that cost 1,000 zuz. She brings it into the marriage. Well, it went up in price and now it's worth 2,000. Each one is worth 1,000. So the problem is that it's not hers. She doesn't take it back. She only gets the original value because this is nechse malug. So she really is only deserving of 1,000. But the problem is she wants the items.
Yeah.
So echad neitlase b'ksubasa. One of them she can take because the original value that she brought into the marriage was 1,000.
So it's in the cloud. She brings an account. She wants the item. She brings the vessel with she wants to take it back, but it increased in value.
She's going to have to pay the increase. Now, that's only on items that were written in the ksuba that she's bringing them in. Normally, whatever item she brings in, she takes back. An regular item would be nechse malug. If it's written in the ksuba, then that item becomes tzayin barzel, that he takes responsibility for it. You see.
So if she did write it, she put in 100 items. How do you know that she ordered it?
Oh, so
There has to be some document.
No.
Otherwise they'll say you never did.
No, so 1 second. In the ksuba, he says that he's going to give her, if they get divorced, a certain amount of money. Then it says, and this is the nedunya that she's bringing in, which is also worth a certain amount. And he's going to add a tesefes, an equivalent amount. But there's a statement in the ksuba that says that she's bringing in items that have a value of a certain amount. That amount he has to replace. And if there's an increase of value, then he keeps the increase, and he has to return just the original value, the historical value.
Is that what that? How do you know if you're saying general, how do you know what the item was? You're saying the moment you write it down.
If she has a
then
car, they get married. So when they get it, if she has the car before they're married, right? They get married. So if they get divorced, so it was her car. Takes it back. It got worth more. It got worth less. He doesn't have to pay if it got worth less, and she doesn't have to pay him if it got worth more.
You're talking about one item. What happens if she brings in 50 different types of items?
Yeah. So all of those, she would have to bring her receipts and say those were the ones that I brought in from before.
Receipts.
Yeah.
Say she brings in china, she bring the wardrobe.
Yeah. This is what they fight about.
Wow.
No, you would want to write it down.
Yeah, but once you write it in the ksuba, if you write it in the ksuba that this is going to be, that he's going to take responsibility for this, then it turns into tzayin barzel. And then if there's an increase, so that she doesn't gain the increase. And so there's a benefit and a loss over there. So what's happening now is that the 2 items that she brought in went up from being 500 each to 1,000 each.
Right.
And so one of them she could take back because she brought in 2 items. Altogether was 1,000, and each one is 1,000, so she takes that back. One of them she has to pay for, and then she could take it. That's an interesting chiddush. Who holds that? Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that she gets the original item. The Gemara says, "My kamashmalan shvach beisavia didehavi." What are you telling me? That things that bring prestige to her family, which is those items, that she's allowed to take the original item. Rabbi Yehuda already have that. Rabbi Yehuda said that before when he argued with Rabami. He says, that could have been only if it's its original price, the way it was written in the ksuba. But we never heard that she can even pay for the original item and take it. That's a chiddush. Kamash malan that she's able to do that. Yeah, what's going on? She brought in an item that now the original, the historical value is lower than what it is now. So how does she's gonna have to pay for it, and she still has the rights to pay for it to get the original item.
Him to get the original item back that she brought in.
Right.
Because it increased in value. It decreased in
It increased in value.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, we have a new Mishnah.
Wow.
Before we go on, you're resolving an estate. Rent out your estate lawyer.
What do you mean if there's a disagreement? When there's a disagreement?
Better listen here. The time.
Oh, I'm sorry, I blew it. I'm sorry, Stefan.
So there's a dispute over an estate. Oh, you want to rent out the lawyer? Okay.
Give out the house. Parcel, if collateral, if you
Yes.
put up collateral as a house, we don't use
Right.
my house, and during the process, I sell a house off. The guy says, okay, put up your collateral. There's no more house.
Right.
That's this kind of a
Yeah.
case, right? It's
Yeah,
just
but
a
what
loss.
happens in that case? No. What happens in that case is that when you sold the house, there was a lien on the house.
Right.
The one that has the
Bought the house. New
the
buyer.
creditor,
Uh-huh.
the one that you borrowed money from,
Okay.
can go to the purchaser and say, you bought a house with a lien on it, and he could take it back. Then the guy has to go back and go to the original owner and get his money back, which is a big hassle. That's why they have these title
Oh, it's title
things.
searches.
What is it called?
Title insurance.
Yeah, but what's what before the not the insurance? Yeah.
Title search.
Yeah, they have to check to make sure it's free from any liens.
What if the original owner left something dangerous? in the property, tell you that,
Yeah, chemicals or something.
gas.
Yeah, they have to be cleaned out. Gas.
Gets sued.
I don't know.
That's why
Yeah.
they sold it.
Right. Bas
You're not allowed to
Yisrael,
sell it.
Shenisas Lakayan Umes. Okay. You have a regular Jewish woman. She marries a Kayan. The Kayan passed away. Okay. During the marriage, she was eating truma because that's the way it works. The Kayan's allowed to eat truma, his wife is allowed to eat truma. Now he passed away. Vinichamu Beres, and she's pregnant. La yoichlo avadea b'truma. Mipnei chelkei shel uber.
So that when the child.
There are
Because he's died.
there's a bit of an issue here. There are other children here. She can eat truma. Why? She doesn't go back to her father's house really because of the children that she had with her husband. She maintains that status of being the wife of a Kayan, and she can still eat because there's children there. The only problem is that she's pregnant. Now, the fetus is going to own some of the slaves together with the brothers that exist. There's slaves here that are going to inherit the husband. Why is it avadeha? Shouldn't it be the husband's?
Maybe she wrote
It's Tzain Barzal. Tzain Barzal. So she only has the value. The estate, the actual items belong to the husband. Does this fit with what we said before with Rabbi Yehuda, that she can take it back? No. If there are inheritors there, so she doesn't take it back. She would only take it back if there were no children. But meanwhile, there's children, so it still continues to belong to the estate. So, okay, the problem is this. Shehu uber paisel ve'ina meichel. Since the fetus is a part owner of the slaves, so the fetus does not feed truma.
doesn't get caught.
The fetus is a kayan. For some reason, we have to see why. It says yilid beisai. Those that are born. Those that are born can also feed, but he wasn't born yet. So it's like a limit from the pasuk that his slaves, the fetus's slaves, cannot eat truma, even though he's a kayan. Now, what does it mean uber paisel? That uber invalidates. Let's say this woman came from a house of Yisraelim, not Kohanim. Her father's house was not Kohanim. She married up. She married a Kohen. Well, when if the husband passes away, she goes back to her father's house. If there's a child, then she stays with the husband. Oh, let's do it the other way. She's the daughter of a Kayan, and she marries a Yisrael. Marries down. So if there's a child, then she remains in the Yisrael's house and she can't eat truma after the husband passes away. So Shah Ubar Paisel. If there's a fetus, she also can't go back to her to her father's house, because this is a fetus that's a Yisrael. Uber Paisel ve'ina Michael, but it can't feed. Rabbi Yossi, that's Rabbi Yossi's rule. Was Dr. Stein. Okay. This is the words of Rabbi Yossi. Amralai, they told to Rabbi Yossi, Me'achar, she adita lanu al bas Yisrael kayan. You were talking about a bas Yisrael to a kayan. What are you saying over here? A bas Yisrael that's married to a kayan. So what does it matter if it's a bas Yisrael that's married to a kayan? That the same thing would apply. Af bas kayan la kayan. Even if they're both kayanim, she comes from a family of kayanim. The husband is a kayan, and if there's a fetus, the servants shouldn't eat truma. What was the original svar over here? Okay, let's take a look. Ibaila, the Gemara is going to explain. Where's the question? Time of the Rabbi Yossi Mishum de Kasavar Uber B'mei Zara Zarhu Idilma Yilud Michael Sheni Yiladena Michael. Interesting. The woman comes from a family of Yisraelim. She's allowed to eat truma because she's married to a Kohen. But the fetus wasn't born yet. When does the child become a Kohen? After he's born. But while he's in the womb, he's part of the mother. Now the mother is not a Kohen. She's allowed to eat truma, but she's not a Kohen. She's a Eishes Kohen. So the child can't have, because the child is an inheritor. The child can't, because he's not a Kohen, his slaves can't eat truma, and he's an inheritor, so the slaves can't eat truma
Before he was born.
before he's born. That's one option.
So this is a fetus that owns slaves, but he's not even alive yet.
Right. So what's coming out over here is that are we saying that the Kohenhood only starts after birth? That's one option. And that's why the slaves that belong to the wife that she brought into the marriage doesn't have to only be Nechse Maluk. It could be all of his slaves would be the same thing. Why does it have to be Tzayin Barzel?
It's the slave fetus connection. That determines whether the
Right.
slaves get. It's the
Right.
fetus that determines it.
Right. Dilma, or maybe it's not, maybe it's different. Maybe the reason why the slaves can't eat is because it has to be born. It doesn't have to do with the Kohenhood. The Gemara says, "Lamai nafkamina." What's the difference? Leuber b'mei kehenes. The difference is if she was a kehenes from birth. So then, either way, it's a Kohen. What's the din? So, Amar Rabba, Hainu Tamid Rabbi Yossi. Rabba says the reason for Rabbi Yossi is the Kasavar Uber B'mei Zara Zaru. Reason is because the Kohenhood only starts from birth. And meanwhile, the fetus is not a Kohen, the slaves can't eat Truma. Rabbi Yosef says no. Rabbi Yosef says that it has to do with only being born, you can feed. But while it's still a fetus, you can't feed Truma. We learned it from a pasuk. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. They said to Rabbi Yosef, al Bas Yisrael l'kayin, Bas Kayin l'kayin mahu. What about if it's a Bas Kayin that marries a Kayin and there's a fetus there? Is the din the same? He says, I only heard that the din is that the slaves can't eat while she's pregnant. In a case where she comes from, she's a Bas Yisrael, but I don't know I never heard the halacha about if she's a Kohenes, which means that if she's a Kohenes, probably they're allowed to eat, which means the din is different. That the fetus inside a woman that's Yisraelis is not considered a Kohen. That's why there's a distinction here. It's exactly the same story. If we're just concerned about a fetus, so a fetus is a fetus. Kasha, you have a good point. Okay, leave it as a question on Rabbi Yosef. On who was it? On Rabbi Yosef. On Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel Zudiv Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel says, this is Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda saying in the name of Shmuel that this is what Rabbi Yosef holds about the fetus not being able to eat, not being able to feed the slaves. Shuma. Chum say 1 second. 1 second. There are slaves here, right?
Right.
If there's only a fetus, then maybe you have a point. But the fact is, you have other inheritors that are able to feed.
Right.
Who are the other inheritors? The brothers of the fetus, the older brothers. So, and they're regular kayanim. So let the slaves eat because of them. No, that's part of the issue here. Yeah. We don't know who really owns what. Who owns what? Maybe this slave belongs to, that's the problem. Ein leibanim, let's say there are no sons. So who inherits? The father's brothers inherit the estate. Ein layachim, if there's no brothers, someone in the father's family is going to inherit this estate, and they're all kayanim. Okay, so when Shmuel said, this is what Rabbi Yossi holds. However, the sages say differently, that the slaves are allowed to eat because of the rest of the family that are kayanim, that own the slaves. So it says, Zu v'lei svirlei. When you say Zu, this is the words of Rabbi Yossi. Does he mean to say that this is the words of Rabbi Yossi, but I don't hold like that because there's the sages? Amli Shmuel or Rav Chana Bagdasa. Shmuel told to Rav Chana Bagdasa. Now, Bagdasa either means that he was from Baghdad, or it means that he was a Baal Agada. Rashi says he was a master of Agadata. He tells him, "Puk aiseli beyasar, go bring me a minion. The emelach ban payo amazakal uberkana." I want to announce a halacha that anyone that bequeaths something to a fetus, the fetus acquires it. That means that he's accepting what Rabbi Yossi holds, that the fetus has ownership here, and he doesn't only enter into the ownership of the state after he's born, but he has ownership even beforehand. It must mean that he says, this is the words of Rabbi Yossi, and this is the halacha. It says, Micah Mashmalan. So then what's he telling me? I guess we understood that the halacha would be like Rabbi Yossi. Why would the halacha be like Rabbi Yossi? Because we didn't know that there was a machlekes. So he says the chiddush is to pligi rabban ala the Rabbi Yossi that there is a machlekes here. We didn't know that there was a machlekes. What about in the Mishnah? It says Amrulai Seemed like they were arguing with him. I don't know. Okay. Umi pligi. Is there really the sages that argue on this? I have to look at the Bach. V'amar Rab Zakai, he adds in a word. V'amar Rab Zakai, zu edus heid Rab Yosim pishmai v'avtalion v'haidolai. We have a statement here that Rabbi Yossi said this over as a testimony that this is a tradition that comes from Shemaya v'avtalion. This comes way before Rabbi Yossi. And they agreed to him. Amar Ravashi, Miktani v'kiblu, does it say they accepted? V'haidul like Tani, it says they agreed. The Mistaber Taime, they agreed that it's logical, but they said nevertheless we don't accept it. Haidulai, they admitted that it makes sense, but it doesn't mean. Yeah. Kiblu would mean that they accepted that it's accurate, but Haidulai just means that they accepted that it's logical.
Therefore, logic doesn't determine.
Yeah, I don't know why. Shouldn't the logic be? Yeah, it's an interesting point. Tanarabanan, we have a brisa. Okay, we're talking about a kohen that passed away, and he left sons. Elu ve'elu eichlim. Elu ve'elu means the slaves that the woman brought in as nichse malug. That means slaves that she was going to take back, or nichse tzain barzal, slaves that were going to be like iron sheep that he was going to he holds on to. So both of them are able, both types of slaves are able to eat truma. Well, nichse malug are eating truma because she's eating truma. And nichse tzain barzal eating truma because the sons are eating truma. They belong to the sons. Hinicha beres. Let's say she's pregnant. So elu ve'elu ein eichlim. Both of them cannot eat. Why? The uber can't feed as an inheritor, can't feed the slaves. And why are her slaves not allowed to eat? The nichse malug, she's allowed to eat, right? Because there's a child. So she stays in there. Oh, there's no child. That's a pshat. There's no child. There's no child. It's just the uber. So she can, yeah, because it's just a fetus, she can't eat. She can't eat. Let's say there's both. Well, now she's allowed to eat. She's allowed to eat because she has sons from a kohen, so she stays in the kohen's family. Because one of the owners of these slaves is the fetus, and the fetus can't feed. That's what Rabbi Yossi says. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi says the name of his father. Who's his father?
There's children.
And the fetus.
Previous.
So we're going to say that we don't know who owns, like you were mentioning, we don't know who owns what. It's going to be problematic. Could be that this slave is actually owned by the fetus. It wasn't divided up. Or even partially would also be a problem.
So you do a DNA test to decide.
Because you can't have the slaves eating half. It's partially owned by someone that can't have truma, can't be feeding truma. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi mishum aviv. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi says the name of his father. Habas ma'acheles, haben ein ma'achel. We're gonna need patience with this. We're not gonna get the pshat over here till the end of the Gemara. So he says something in the name of his father. He says that a daughter feeds but not a son. Hold it, because right now it's very unclear what that means. Rab Shimon ben Yochai Aimer, Zecharim yaichlu kulan. If all the children are male, then everyone is allowed to eat,
Right.
even if there's a fetus.
This whole core is really based on after the passing and now the usual being
Yeah.
split up.
If all the children are male, then the slaves can eat because of the boys that are there that own everything. There's a fetus, but it doesn't matter. Nekeves, if all the children are nekeves, then lo yachlu, then the slaves cannot eat. Shemi yimtza uber zachar. Maybe the uber is going to be a male. Vein labanis b'makam ben klum. And therefore, the ones that are here that actually, you see, if all the descendants are girls, then they inherit. The one boy messes up their inheritance, he takes everything. So in this case, if the fetus is going to be a boy, so really the slaves belong to the fetus, and the fetus can't feed. The Gemara says, "My area shema yumtza uber zachar." We said there's a problem over here. Maybe the uber is going to be a male, the fetus is going to be a male, and all the females are going to lose their inheritance. Typically, the nekeva nami pasla, even if it's in a keva. Why do I need it that the fetus owns everything, even if he's a partial owner? I should say, even if she's a partial owner, because it's only female children. So it's also a problem because the fetus, as a partial owner of the slaves, can't feed. The Gemara says you're right. There's 2 points. It's a double issue, double problem. Either way you go, it's a problem. Okay. If they're all male, then the slaves can eat. The Gemara says, really? What about the fetus? The fetus is a partial owner, and the partial owner can't feed. Kasavar in Chayshin Lemiyuta. What are you worried about? It's 50-50 chance that the baby's going to be a female. Female doesn't inherit. Now, in those 50% that it's going to be a male, not all children survive. So it's less than a 50% chance that it's going to be a male. So we don't suspect to the minority. And therefore, if all the children are male, then ignore the fetus. Why? Well, it's either going to be a girl or it's going to be less than 50% chance male. By the way, it's less than 50% female also. A little detail there. Okay, don't take this too far. Another pshat, we are concerned that it could be a male child, and that would really mess things up. However, what we do is we have a solution. We do what Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel says. Let's say there's orphans that want to divide up the father's inheritance. The Bezdin can set up a caretaker for the estate. What do you call that? Curator, guardian. And separates, divides up this portions. And when they grow up, they can actually contest what they got. Rav Nachman himself holds that when they grow up, they can't contest it. Because if they can, then what's the power of the court? Gemara says, so basically, what do we have over here? What Rav Nachman is telling us is that what we can do is we can divide up the estate in a way that the slaves do not belong to the fetus. You know what the fetus gets? He gets the pots and pans and the whatever and everything else that's not the slaves. The slaves belong to the brothers that are alive, and therefore they can only truma. It's a good solution because you want to be able to feed them truma. Gemara says if this is the case, if this is actually what's going on over here, then Reb Nachman's solution would only fit according to Reb Shimon ben Yochai, that says the male one, if male children, then they're allowed to eat. It doesn't fit with Reb Shmuel bar Rabbi Yossi or Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara says, Lema to Rav Nachman Tanaihi. Maybe not everyone agrees with Rav Nachman. The Gemara says, Lai. The Kuli Al Mismud Rav Nachman, everyone holds that this is a possible solution. The question is, over here we're not dealing with that solution. Over here we're dealing with a different machlekes. Do we suspect to the minority? Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi Omer Mishum Aviv Habas Michael Haben Eina Michael. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi says in the name of his father, which is Rabbi Yosi, he says that the girl, if there's a girl, but no son, then the slaves can eat. If there is a son, then the slave can't eat. Gemara says, "Maishna ben delay Michael mishum chelke shaluber bas nami lay tachel mipnei chelke shaluber." What's the difference if there's another son or a daughter? The fetus messes up everything. It says, "Amar Abaya hachem ben achasim mu'atam maskinan." Here, let me explain. Abaya says, really, the boys inherit everything. However, the sages came along and made an institution that if there are young girls in a family and the father passes away and the boys just run away with everything, who's going to raise the girls? They said that if there's not enough in the estate for the girls, the boys don't get anything. It all goes to the girls. So until they're eligible to get married. So and there is a son and there's a daughter. So in other words, like this, even if the ubar is going to be a son, it doesn't matter because we give the estate to the daughter. And if it's a daughter, then it's a problem, right? If the uber is a daughter, then we give it to the daughter, and then the uber has a chelik in it. So what we're saying is that we don't give it to the daughter. We don't give it to the uber daughter because the takana of the Rabbanan was only for the one that's born already. And since there's the son there as well, so really midiraisa goes to the son. You're trying to say that it goes to the daughter, but that's only a takana de Rabbanan after it was born. So here, everything rabbinically goes to that one daughter that's alive, and therefore we have zero concern about the uber. If it's a son, then it's no stronger than the son that already exists that doesn't get anything. Ibasi, if it's a daughter, okay. So the Gemara now said I didn't translate. So until it gets born, the sages never instituted that. Because you came to Ben Chasim, you said that this is talking about that there's a very small amount of in the estate. Ema Seifa, if you read further, it says Shemiyim to Uber Zachar. Maybe it's going to be a male. Vein Labanis b'makom ben klum, and the son and the daughters don't get anything. If it's Adarab, on the contrary, Nechasim Matim Debanis, they get everything. Gemara says Seifa Asan Lenechasim Merubim. The Seifa was a different case. The Gemara says Nechasim Matim Debanis. Is that how it works? Everything. If there's not a lot of in the inheritance, the daughters get everything. We have a rule that if they did sell it, it's actually considered a good sale. So it's not really owned by the daughters. It's really the sons have the right to sell it. Balamai bas tiktani, aim. What Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosi actually said was the girl can eat. Let's see his words again. Rabbi Shmuel bar Yosi Aviv habas ma'acheles haben eina meichel. The mother can eat, but not the children, but not the fetus. Gemara says Yihachi Hainu Rabbi Yosi. Which means that the mother can feed the nichse malug, the ones that she owns 100%. What she brought into the marriage, what she takes out with her, she can feed. But the ben, which has the inheritance of the father, which is the tzayin barzel, why they call it ein? It's why they call it bas.
Yeah.
And say, oh, the girls, they talk about women, the girls. So, then what's he saying? He's not saying anything different than Rabbi Yossi. It says, Kul Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi K'tanila. What it means to tell me is that this whole brisa was said over by Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Yossi is actually not saying anything different. He's quoting what his father's saying. It's all his opinion. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Yeah.
Woo!